There's a difference between vetting the broker and vetting the transaction. The transaction vetting is easy. What are their revenues? Are they profitable? And do they debt service? Right? Those are kind of three initial criteria right out of the gate.
Welcome back to ACS Portfolio Perspective. I'm your host, Andrew Pace, Chief Client Experience Officer at ACS. I'm joined today with a longtime friend and colleague in the equipment finance world, Bruce Brandon, Vice President of Indirect Business Development and Training at TCS Equipment Finance. Bruce is a 25-year veteran of the equipment and leasing and finance industry with deep experience across sales leadership, capital markets, syndication, and broker channel development. He's held leadership roles at Onset Financial, Pacific Western Bank, Marquette Equipment Finance, and Bank Financial in Chicago, generating well over $100 million in new business throughout his career. At TCS, Bruce oversees national indirect business development through brokers, vendors, and manufacturers, while also leading new salesperson training across the organization. He also holds dual bachelor's degrees in finance and real estate from Cal State Northridge. Bruce, welcome to the show.
How you doing? How you doing, Andrew? Good to see you as always.
Great seeing you as well. Thank you again for agreeing to join us on the podcast. With that background, you've spent a lot of time sitting at the intersection of brokers, credit, and capital. I want to start with how you think about the broker desk at TCS and why the middle market is such a deliberate focus for you. Can you walk us through your role at TCS and what overseeing national indirect business development actually looks like day to day?
Well, my two roles are kind of related. I think that when TCS brought me on here, I know the owner. We've worked together for more than 20 years. I know a couple of the managers here that we worked together for more than 20 years. And they thought, like, from a sales perspective, that I was the perfect person to come help them integrate new salespeople into their organization. And so from a sales perspective, it's what I've done almost my entire career. So I'm good at that. And so they brought me on to help train some of the new salespeople. And that is as simple as that. I am the trainer of the new salespeople that we hire to help them get out into the world and get new lease business on behalf of TCS. The second half of that is the broker side, which is why we're probably here. And as an independent middle market lessor, we're finding and we've found that there are a lot of opportunities out there that brokers run into on an annual basis that fall outside of what their typical category is themselves and fall into our category, which is that $300,000 to $30 million realm, middle market. And so I run that effort on behalf of TCS. I'm not in sales outbound. I work with brokers to help them get their middle market opportunities approved whenever they have them.
Thank you. So TCS focuses heavily on the, as you just mentioned, $300,000 to $30 million middle market range. Why is that sweet spot so important, particularly for the broker community?
Well, it's important because a lot of times those type of transactions are the type of transactions that small to medium-sized, maybe even mid-sized companies will have. And when you get into the really large corporations, those are investment grade, audited financial type companies where a broker solution may be too expensive because they have lower pricing options all around them, where it kind of cuts brokers out of that marketplace. In this marketplace, there are companies that brokers run into based on their vendor relationships that happen to be decent companies that have a relatively large type of opportunity, and the vendor might need some help getting that product moved with financing. So they lean on their broker relationships to get those done. However, if it's in the middle market category, it's not normal for them to have those types of transactions that they do on an annual basis. And so we're there to help in that area.
You said before that most small ticket brokers run into 3-4 larger transactions a year. how does TCS position itself to help brokers successfully get those deals done?
Like I said before, the efforts that they go through on an annual basis, the relationships with either their customers or their vendors, they're doing small ticket transactions, but every now and then they'll get asked, "Hey, we've got this customer that's buying a $700,000 machine. Can you help us?" And when I meet with these brokers, they always say to me, "Gosh, every year I get a request that when they ask me and it's $1 million, I don't know what to do." Thank goodness for you, Bruce, because we've been looking for someone like you to help fund those types of transactions. So, hopefully, to answer your question, is we hopefully we want to help them in that space because they're not that educated as it relates to full underwriting. When you get to large transactions like that, it's no longer credit app and Paydex and 24-hour turnaround. You're just not going to get that on $1 million deal. So it's audited financial statements, it's reviewed financial statements. It could be tax returns with the accountant's compilation, but it's more complicated. We use terms like underwriting and debt service coverage ratio and things like that that these companies need to qualify for before they're ultimately approved. So instead of 24-hour turnaround on an app only basis, we're going to be a week out for good credits and maybe even longer if all we're getting is tax returns.
Thank you. Thank you. You spend a lot of time building relationships at industry events like NIFA and AACFB. Why does face-to-face interaction still matter so much in broker relationships today?
Because I'm better looking than my competitors.
Very
No,
true. Very true.
I've learned by going to these conventions that there is a big time camaraderie that I didn't grow up with in this business. I came from the realm that we did everything. 99.9% everything we've done in my 20 plus years of experience has been over the phone. This has been an intangible product that I've sold and that I have done well with. I know people that have made lots of money and have great careers doing this intangible business. But these conventions, I can tell that there's a certain camaraderie that adds an element that we are leaning heavy into, and that is the face-to-face contact. The things that you're doing, golfing. I don't golf, but those events, that interaction, I see it in you, and I envy the relationships that you have with some of these other people that you've established over the years because they trust you and they go to you. And what happens with the face to face is the trust aspect. You get to know them, they become your friends. And so all of a sudden, the element of who should I go to if I get a larger transaction kind of disappears if Bruce is your buddy or Bruce is your pal, or Bruce and you liked him in person when you met him in New Orleans or Chicago. And if I can reduce the element of being unsure as to who you might call, then that benefits me and it benefits TCS by attending these events.
Or in our case, Charlotte. That's where you and I met. We met at a
Right.
first timers networking event at the NIFA Charlotte, which was the very first in-person event coming out of the pandemic. And we just happened to be standing in line. I think I was talking to a colleague of yours that happened to be from Rochester, and we obviously both both had a love for the Bills. And she introduced me to you, and obviously we hit it off because we both had something in common. We both were really passionate about our football teams, you being the Vikings and me being the Bills. And we shared some misery there because both our teams are yet to win a Super Bowl. So that gives a picture of how brokers fit in the middle market strategy at TCS. Of course, broker source volume can be incredibly valuable, but it also requires discipline on the credit side. So let's talk about how you think about vetting deals and managing credit quality. So what is the reality of broker source deal flow today, especially when it comes to seeing transactions that have been declined elsewhere?
It's funny you mentioned that because I had just gotten out of a meeting with our president last week, and I had to just tell him, like, look, this is my world. And we're talking about just all of the headaches and the quirky aspects of dealing with these types of transactions. Granted, brokers run into situations that aren't that marketable in the normal aspects of getting deals done. Credit is usually strange. There's a lot of startups. There's a lot of changes in the business environment. Usually, it can also be quirky equipment that's not normal that banks hate. And so, a lot of the broker deals are full of hair and full of just the most incredible quirks that I mean, we'd be on the phone for 3 hours if I could just run stories by you about the stuff that we have to deal with, and a lot of it is headaches, it's a lot of headaches, and it's like, "What now?" Every day, every twice a week, it's like, "What now? What now?" That's my world, and we get through it, and consequently, the brokers make good points because I think the customer also understands that they're asking us, they're reaching out to us to see if you have the ability to get my deal done based on these tax returns that I'm giving you and the transitions that my company has made in the past 2 years, positive or negative. There's just a lot of things that go on. So that's just one aspect of the credit part of the transaction of our transactions. The other part is the educational side from what brokers are used to compared to what they're not used to. And so not only do they need someone to come in that has experience doing middle-sized or middle market type transactions, what they're not that used to is getting audited financials, reviewed financials, or asking those questions because they're used to a credit profile that is Paydex and credit score. They submit that to an Apple-only source, they process it, and they get an approval back in 24 hours. So imagine you're a broker who has no experience doing middle market transactions, and I'm asking them for a list of these things that they're not accustomed to, and it makes them kind of nervous, but that's why they use us, because we know what it takes. But at the same time, they may have issues getting that information from their sources, because a lot of times they're going through their vendors and their vendors don't know.
Right.
their vendors, their vendors don't even have a relationship with the financial decision makers. The vendors are usually talking to the operation manager. So imagine the broker dealing with the vendor, and he has to ask the vendor to get the audited financials from the CFO. And the vendor's like, "Holy cow, we don't even know who the CFO is."
Right.
It's just all day, just stuff like that that we deal with on the credit side. But I don't know if that gets into your answer, but there's a lot I can get into in that question.
For sure. And then there'll be more time that we can unpack some more of that. Yeah, how do you quickly vet both the broker and the transaction so you can get to a yes or no before too much time and energy is invested in that?
There's a difference between vetting the broker and vetting the transaction. The transaction vetting is easy. What are their revenues? Are they profitable? And do they debt service? Right? Those are kind of three initial criteria right out of the gate. How big is the transaction? Okay, so it's $800,000. Great. What can you tell me about the equipment? What is this project? Okay, great. Do you know that they're profitable? How big is the company? Well, they made $1 million for the first time last year. They're like, well, I'm not sure if that's going to work for us, but I can still look at it and see what's going on. Because if they're legitimate $1 million companies that'll make $1 million forever, because there may be a regional hospital. Those revenues are never going to grow more than that, but they're profitable for the past 10 years. So there may be hope there. But otherwise, a company that makes $1 million may be too small to justify $800,000 deal. So I can ask the broker, what are their revenues? 10 million. Okay, check there. Right? Do you know if they're profitable? Oh yeah, they've been making money hand over fist. They're growing, and now they need this new machine. And my vendor contact gave me this lead, and he's nervous because he knows they're good credit. So that's quick. Now, vetting the broker, we have an onboarding process that before we pay any commissions to a broker, we have them fill out what we call as a broker application. And there's a whole vetting and onboarding process that takes place behind the scenes. They fill out a W-9. They give us all of their, or if they can, financial information, and we just want to make sure the broker is not on any type of negative list that may be out there. And that's our internal vetting process on the broker. So it's different than credit for a company. And so those two processes are entirely different.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Can you talk about the spectrum of the financial statements? You mentioned, audited, reviewed, down to compiled, and why that distinction matters so much in full underwriting.
Good question. Audited, obviously being the best, means that an accounting firm has been hired, and this company is probably paid a pretty penny to have an accounting firm come in and lift the veil of everything that has to do with the company financially. They've come in, they've run tests on the information that they found in the financial statements to make sure that everything is up to snuff, and then they'll sign off on it on the front page of the financial statements. At the first page, it's the audit. We have audited these financial statements and represent that X, Y, and Z has happened or hasn't happened, and we verify these numbers based on our reputation. That's what a review or a auditor's page would say. Now, a review is exactly what it sounds like. We have reviewed the information. Now, as it relates to what a company will pay for that, an audit, let's say you pay 20 grand for an audit, a review might cost 12 grand, right? And a compilation might cost 5 grand in terms of how detailed they get in. A review, I've seen reviews. I mean, an audit, I've seen audits where an accounting firm brings in a team from Tennessee. They bring in 7 people and they live in your building for a week and they audit everything. A review could be close, but it's less in scope. And they say that on the page where they said that they've reviewed the information. And a review, for your information, is less in scope than an audit. But they have run the numbers and they've done a few things that are similar to an audit. So in terms of trust and verify, we will accept audits and reviews as our number 1 and 2 key submissions in terms of getting a credit reviewed properly in rates. You can trust audited numbers, and there are more options for banks that we work with to take audited financial statements because it's all the same. There's a standard that they go by, and there's more banks that only deal with audited financials. So we have more options as an underwriter to get lower rates for companies in that category. A compilation is exactly what it sounds like. Let's gather a bunch of information. Here are your financials, here are your accounting records, here's your accounts receivables, and we're going to compile them into an order that you can understand on paper. And that's it. We're not reviewing anything. I'm not getting my calculator out. I'm not running any tests, but we're going to compile them into a visual format that anybody looking at financial statements can understand more quickly than you would if you just got a pile of tax returns. Are you following me so far?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. That's
and we're only going to charge you $4,000 for that on top of that. So now you can see the quality of what's being submitted and how that might play into how deals get done quicker compared to not as quick, because there's more work to be done. If you have to go through and spread compiled information, you kind of have to come to your own conclusions when you go through that. Whereas an audit, you can trust the numbers. It's right there. There's not much you have to do at all because it's right there.
Right. No, it makes a lot of sense. So let's pivot and talk about the trucking downturn. Obviously, it caught a lot of people off guard. What lessons did TCS take away from that cycle?
Good question. I think what we learned is that we're no different in our assessment of the trucking industry as a lot of other financial institutions. You feel bad when you have to turn down what looks like to be a good credit, but the industry of trucking has a big black mark across its forehead. As it relates to how banks and other financial institutions perceive those companies. And it's kind of the business model. And I think from an asset perspective, the economy plays a big role into the value of those assets if you were to ever get them back. For example, in the event of a default, you have a bunch of tractors and trailers that you've just leased to a particular company, but they are in remedies mode. You have to repossess. Well, if the market for tractors and trailers is saturated all across the world, where a bunch of them are just sitting in lots all over the place, then the value of the assets that you leased are in the tank and probably don't meet the assumptions that you made on day one as to what the value of that equipment would be. So here you are 2 years into a 5-year lease, repossessing these assets that have completely depleted in value. And that's how companies go out of business. And once you do one or two of those transactions that get into that space, if you survive it, you'll never do it again. And I think that's what you're seeing with banks that have been caught holding the bag on that type of collateral for years. And so the whole industry is like, no more. So you get these transactions and you're like, we like it, but I don't think we're going to be able to get it done because we don't have a place to go with it.
Right. What about specialty transportation versus over the road trucking today? And where is TCS more comfortable leaning in? Is it in that specialty sector of transportation, bucket
Yeah, I mean
trucks?
that's a great question because I'm picking on over the road tractors and trailers, right? But if you get into a cement truck or vacuum truck, that's a specialty truck or a boom truck. Those are specialty trucks. They're revenue generating vehicles that are mission critical to most companies' operations. So you have companies that get these things. A company that gets a bunch of vacuum trucks are probably in the vacuum truck business. And so they need those to generate the business that they get. And so they become more mission critical. Whereas the examples that you see, if Walmart got a tractor and trailer and the driver decided that he's not making enough money and just jumped out of the truck and left it on the side of the road, is Walmart impacted by losing that truck? Or if they drove it into a ditch or the driver drove it over the side of a cliff, how much is Walmart impacted by losing that one truck? Probably zero, right?
I guess it depends how many trees they have to replace or guardrails, of course.
Right. I'm just saying that the specialty trucks have more intrinsic value to us as a lender because we know that the company, if things go bad, if they're gonna try to salvage the business, they're gonna want to make their payments on those things to keep the business running.
Right.
And that's important to us.
Yeah, I mean, the specialty essential, right? I mean, obviously, if it's essential and it's needed, those are the companies you wanna invest in, right?
Right.
So after 3 years on the broker desk at TCS, how has your approach to deal vetting evolved?
I think it's evolved in getting to the point quicker. It's much better to be honest with the brokers that it's going to take if all you have is tax returns, you're 2 weeks out. Do business with me or not.
Right.
Because I could sound like that desperate salesperson that says, "Oh yeah, we can get it done quickly," and I'm misleading the brokers, right? Tax returns, you have to vet those things. You have to go through them. and spread the numbers yourself. Whereas an audit, like I said, is more efficient. So when you talk about evolution in my department, instead of sounding like I am the company that can do everything fast, there's just no speed when it comes to underwriting tax returns. And have we done tax returns quickly? Yes, we have. There are companies out there. We did one last year that for what's surprising to me, a company that does $100 million in revenue only does tax returns. Company's profitable. They've been in business since 1935. And speaking to the president of the company, he just says that they never needed to. And there are companies out there that don't need to pay $50,000 for an audit because their business has been running the way it's been running for years, and it's not impacted by the need to pay $50,000 for someone to come and audit their financial statements. And so you have a good credit that's profitable with tax return, $100 million. Those are outliers. Most of the time, it's a smaller company with tax returns, and they're one lawsuit away from going out of business because they're just not big enough to absorb a major impact to their company. And so the evolution is that we just have to be real with the brokers when it comes to tax returns, which I would submit is 75% of the types of deals that they do business with. They're getting deals from 10 to $20 million companies or 5 million to $20 million companies. And those companies are more likely to just have tax returns. If you're lucky, you can get a compilation.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So would it would those companies be flush with cash? Could that be a reason why they're maybe providing just tax returns versus having audited financials? Is it because
First
they
of all,
just
well,
sitting on a
no,
lot of cash?
no, no,
No.
no. An audit is expensive. Now, if you do government contracting, then you have to have audits. So that's a cost that you have to figure out in your business. That if you're financing with the government, it's required that you have audited financials. Or if you're a medical company, you or pharmaceutical, small pharmaceutical, you have to have audits because you're doing business with entities that require that information is vetted to the highest standard. Your financial information,
Mm.
no fraud, no weird stuff. The owner can't be doing weird stuff. I mean, all that stuff is vetted in the audit. Most companies that are small just don't need it. A donut company that's making $15 million and they sell donuts. They don't need an audit. They don't need to spend $50,000 to get an audit. Why? Well, I mean, just what? Who? Why do we need to be scrutinized? Unless I'm going to go public. But at $15 million, that's too small. But if I was a $500 million donut company and I needed to go public, I'd have to do audits. But a $10 to $15 million company, donut company that has 5 locations in Northern Oregon, uh, probably has no reason to pay a whole bunch of money to have their financial statements
Right.
vetted in terms of what a review or audit costs.
Yeah, you mentioned donut company, kind of like the one where we visited in California at a strip mall where they were cash only. Wouldn't
Right.
take a credit card.
It would even, yeah, that blew me away. That blew me away. I mean, yeah, a company that doesn't even accept any type of plastic. And
Right.
yeah, that company, yeah.
They were looking for new equipment to get financed through TCS. They would definitely they would definitely that would be weeks or months of trying to get that
Right.
deal underwritten.
Right. Right.
Um, so you've laid out a very thoughtful credit philosophy. What's interesting is that some of the strongest opportunities do not come through traditional broker conversations at all. So I'd like to shift to vendor relationships and the idea of getting in through the back door. So you often say the best brokers are working vendor relationships just as hard as borrower relationships. What does that look like in practice?
From the vendor side.
Yes, from the vendor relationship side, yes.
In practice, I think that the vendors are sensitive market. We kind of touched on this in one of the out sessions at the last convention at the ACFB, I think it was, where vendor relationships come and go. And I don't think anybody can brag about their 10-year vendor relationship because they go through hard times. They go through difficult times. Vendors are in the business of selling whatever their product is, right? And so if you're not Hewlett Packard or IBM or John Deere or Cat that have their own financial affiliates that they run their business through, Dell Finance or IBM Credit Corp, that's part of a small box on the sale application, on the invoice that you can check the box and get financing. If you don't have that, which 95% of most vendors don't, then they either have bank relationships or they broker relationships. In other words, there's this relationship that they have that brokers are here to help you sell your equipment. I'm here. I could start a vendor relationship. I'm not even a broker. We're a direct middle market equipment lender. I could go to the same vendor and says, "Look, skip the middleman. Why would you go through a broker that's going to add 5 to 10 points to the cost of the deal? You can go direct through me where that's not even a conversation and give your customer the best possible rate and get your equipment sold because they can't pay cash for it or they don't want to pay cash for it. You have a industrial oven that costs $1.5 million. Who wants to buy that? Who wants to use their cash, the quality of their cash, to buy some metal box that burns up every day to 1,000 degrees? That's just not a good investment of your money, and CFOs know that, which is why they decide to finance these things. So if you go to a convention, whether it's plastics or robotics or restaurant equipment, and you make a pitch to these manufacturers and vendors that make these things, you can get traction with these companies if you promise them the things that they care about the most, which is their customer and moving the equipment, right? So they want to make sure you're going to take care of their customer. You're not going to embarrass them on rates, and you have quick turnaround and all those things that you would want if you went to go get a car. Cars are great examples. You can walk into a car dealership and drive away the same day with financing and insurance. They have the whole solution right there at the desk. And that's what vendors want. They want it to be seamless. They want it to be easy. And so that's the challenge with with vendors. And so a lot of times what vendors don't understand, Andrew, are credit. They're not in the business to understand credit. They only understand selling their equipment, but they don't understand the aspects and the challenges of credit. And they may have a customer that really needs a $3 million piece of equipment, and they're excited. They're chomping at the bit to make that sale, but the customer is not in a position to write a check for $3 million. So they need financing. So now the pressure shifts. They're excited about making a sale. The vendor's like, "You got to do my financing. You got to do this. You got to get this done." Right? And so they're pressuring you to get the financing, and all of a sudden, here we go. Tax returns. I'm cracking myself up. Tax returns, an owner who, if you look at the financials, is distributing $500,000 to himself every single year. And you look on his personal financial statement, he's got a Lexus, a boat, 2 properties, one in the Bahamas, one in Martha's Vineyard. another one in California, jewelry, and and so it causes us to think as underwriters, like, what's going on? This guy lives high on the hog. If he can take the business down based on the tax return. So that becomes the issues that you have with credit, even if you took a personal guarantee. I'm talking a lot about this, but I'm just giving you an example as it relates to vendors, because all that emotion switched, but all this customer can provide are tax returns. And so now we're in the drama phase. Well, it's not going to be as quick as you want, vendor, but I have no idea when it's going to be either. It's just going to be longer than a week or 2 weeks before we get this thing credit approved. And these guys are freaking out because they think they're going to lose a sale. And the customer wants the equipment, and they think the customer feels like all this is being taken care of. And now they're on the phone hammering the vendor, what's taking so long? And the vendor's coming to us going, what's taking so long? And then I'm calling my credit people. I'm like, what's taking so long?
So
It's a weird, strange world we live in, but that's kind of just an example. But you asked the question, how do you manage that? Yeah, and it's a case by case basis, because the opposite is also true. You can get a vendor that has a 5A1 company that's investment grade, and it goes quickly. And if you can do those and keep them happy, then your vendor is going to send you more deals and more deals and more deals. But all the deals aren't like that. So what happens is that then also managers. I mean, this is all part of it. Okay, so you're dealing with one guy at the vendor that you're dealing with. That's the person you met. He split. He's gone. He worked there a year and a half, did his thing, or didn't make quota, got fired, or maybe he got plucked from another company. And now you're at ground zero because that was your appointment at that vendor. And you try to reach out to some of the other people in the company to do the same thing. You're like, maybe yeah, maybe we'll call you if we need you. But you have no relationship with anybody else inside the vendor. So that's the other part, is the human aspect. These people don't stick around. You don't have you usually have a vendor relationship, not necessarily with the company. The vendor relationships with the guy, the sales manager or the salesperson that works at that company that you buddied up with, and he's giving you deals. But if he splits,
you got to start all over again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good segue into this next question that I have for you. How are you thinking about participating more directly in manufacturer and vendor conventions as a lender?
Well, I was brought on to TCS to grow this department. To start it up by myself. I've been attending some of the conferences we met, but I also intend on growing the group, because I can't do it all. It's a lot of traveling, and going to some of these conventions is brutal on the body. Just the whole traveling aspect of it. So the point is that we need to go to more conventions to grow our efforts in this business. And so we need to go to more. I think that just like the brokers are doing, we need to visit and attend more of these conventions. There's a lot of traction that could be made, but I'm just one person, so I can't do it all. And by growing the department, I can get more people to do some of those things and hopefully grow the business. And that's kind of the answer to that question.
Thank you. So we've talked a lot about strategy, credit, access. Let's bring this home for the brokers listening who want to move up market and do this consistently. Why do brokers who are successful in app-only small ticket deals often get caught off guard when a larger deal lands on their desk?
Why do they get caught off guard?
Yeah.
Because that's not what they do. I mean, it's that simple. But the point is they don't want to just flip it and walk away, because if I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, imagine getting 15 points or 10 points on a $50,000 deal, right? That's a $5,000 commission check. In my world, that's not that big. But 10 points is a lot of points. That's huge because we do $10 million transactions. And so to throw out 10 points on a $10 million transaction, imagine the commissions. And I've seen those deals. I've seen 10-point transactions on $10 million deals. All of us have done one or two in our lifetimes, but there's other people around that do them too. So you see it. So it's not impossible, but it's rare in our business. But it's commonplace on the broker side because they're doing small ticket. So the answer to your question is that when they trip into a larger deal, they're not going to just say, I can't do anything. I can't help you, Mr. Customer. See you later. They're going to call Bruce to see if, man, I've never, even 1 point on a $1 million transaction is a $10,000 commission check compared to the 10 points I was making on $50,000. So if Bruce can get that deal done, I'm going to send all my larger deals to him because if he can approve them, I'm good for the year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the reality of what you're saying is that because it's not what they do, they're used to. It's very easy to ask someone to fill out a business application because they'll run the credit and get all the information that they need. They'll get a Paydex and they'll get a credit score. A credit, set your 760, 520. That's all they need to go to channel partners, to Navitas, to all these different companies. That's kind of almost all they need. Maybe a couple of bank statements. And their deal gets reviewed and approved or rejected in 24, 48 hours. That's all that the brokers have ever had to do as long as they're in that small ticket realm, because that's the model.
Right.
Larger than that, there's a lot more questions that they're not prepared for that they need to be educated about. But I don't think if you're telling me that they're only running into 1 or 2 a year, I don't think they're going to spend a lot of energy learning about middle market requirements. Because first of all, I don't have any in front of me. But if I do, do I need to spend a lot of time learning about what I need to submit to Bruce in the event that I run into a $500,000 deal? I don't think that is something that they're burning a lot of calories on.
Right. Just kind of deal with it when it happens.
Right.
So where do you see the biggest difference between seasoned brokers with established niches versus newer brokers who are still learning the fundamentals?
Just the understanding, just the experience of what I just described.
Yep.
So if they're a broker, there are a few. You go to NIFA, and they're middle market brokers. I get those deals too, and they understand what you need. They understand that they need the past 3 years financial statements, interims. We're looking for reviews or audits. We need a purpose and justification statement. In other words, what that means is the purpose of the equipment. Why are they getting this crane? Not that they're just getting a crane. Why? Why are they getting? That's important to all of our lenders. Why are they getting the crane? And then also, what? So what is the crane? Are they replacing it, or are they adding to their crane inventory? So there are a lot of questions regarding the equipment, and ultimately, what is it going to do? I mean, that's all in the purpose and justification. So those are questions that come into the kind of information that we need in our submissions that brokers don't normally have. But then, like your questions dealt with, what about the experienced brokers? So the experienced brokers kind of know that. So you'll get a write-up from an experienced broker that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
There are some brokers I'm like, wow, this guy's great. And man, it's just a breath of fresh air. It is. It's just a breath of fresh air when a broker. And the good news is what happens with some of these experienced brokers, they used to be ex-leasing guys. They probably worked at a leasing company, so they know what's necessary to send to someone like myself in terms of what we need to have a good presentation. And I've got several of those kind of guys too. So, so the dichotomy is that we have to deal with both aspects. The rookies or the ones that don't know compared to the ones that do. So you just like, I hate to say it, you get one from an inexperienced guy, you're like, "Oh boy, okay. Do you have an hour so I can run this by you, so I can run this as to what you need?" And, uh, and so that's just the world I live in. I guess I love it. I'm still here.
So when you look at a broker, what signals tell you that they're worth cultivating as a long-term partner? In addition to what you just described about, the prep work involved and knowing what you need to help get a deal approved.
It's usually experience. I've in the past year, I've worked with 2 brokers whom I'm not sure that I care if I ever work with them again. And each situation was different in its own right, but it was enough that I could say that I if they called me, I'm gonna listen, but I'm gonna be less tolerant of the stuff that I put up with them the last time we did business. So that's the extent of my answer there.
Gotcha. And if you can give one piece of advice to a younger broker who wants to move in to the consistent middle market deal flow, what would it be?
Well, you have to prospect bigger and and you have to well, so a lot of brokers spend their energy going to vendors, right? When I go to some of the training sessions at the AAC, CFB, and NEPA, oftentimes the brokers are in these sessions talking about the vendor relationships that they have, or a lot of times they get referrals from other brokers that you might have an agricultural broker who ran into a deal that is not in his category. So I'll get calls from brokers who are working with other brokers. So both of them have to get paid. Look, I'm working for a buddy of mine, Bruce, and so he gave it to me. So there's two pieces of the pie that have to split the commission if this deal gets done. I mean, it gets complicated all around. And so you're asking me, what would I say to an inexperienced broker that wants to spend more time in the middle market? The middle market is different because the bigger companies get bigger deals, and and it's changing their business model a little bit. But you have to call like we do. We have an outbound sales force that call into these companies directly to the CFOs and the controllers. I think that the brokers have done a great job going to these conventions and getting deals through these vendors, right? But it also might, and I think the difference, their pitch to the vendors is I can get your deal turned around in 24, 48 hours. And so that's small ticket.
Yeah.
Right? That small ticket, and so that's the pitch, and so they're selling themselves as a small ticket vendor, right? So they need to ask the question, "And what do you guys do with your larger deals? Who do you guys work with in that aspect?" And then the question might come back to them is that, "Okay, if we give you a larger deal, how quickly can you turn those around?" Because we have people that we go to, and their pitch might be, "Well, I actually have access to people like Bruce who can turn deals around as quickly as you think you're getting them done with the context that you have."
Hmm.
If that's a world that you want to spend time in. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. No, that's great advice. Thank you. Um, so we have to end on this one. You've kind of become known for bringing donuts to conferences. So I have to ask, what is the better move? Do you go with something consistent like Krispy Kreme where everyone knows what they're going to get? Or do you go local and try to stand out a bit more?
When I first started doing the donuts, I thought, okay, Krispy Kreme is easy. That's an easy decision. Who doesn't like Krispy Kremes? And the fact of the matter is that nobody uh, dislikes Krispy Kremes. And so I started off doing the Krispy Kreme donuts. Then it was suggested, I think it was by you, Andrew, that I mix it up a little bit, right, and go local. And it's a good idea because Krispy Kreme's is this big corporation, so we go to all these different cities. And you're right. You should invest in the community that you're visiting. And so your idea was to go to a local donut place, like the lady we went to in Huntington Beach. Wow, put a hole in the wall, man. That place was amazing. But it was a local community, and you can tell it's a family-owned business, and they take cash only, hint, hint.
Yeah.
But we support, so the point is that with the local community, a lot of them try to separate themselves from Krispy Kremes. So they offer a variety of wild and crazy exotic donuts, and that's great. So we've experimented with that, and it's just fun to come with a mix. And so it just depends. Like, for example, I think that the cool thing about Krispy Kremes is that they are on the DoorDash list of companies that you can go to. Some of the smaller companies are not.
Yeah.
And in a pinch, if I'm in a hurry or if I need to have donuts delivered, Krispy Kremes is that company that can do that, like, right away. So sometimes I'm forced to do that, and I was the last time because we were on Disney property. We were staying at Disney World or Disney, uh, what's that area called? I forgot the area that we
Disney
were at.
Springs or
Disney
yeah,
Springs.
yeah.
Yeah, so if you're on Disney Springs property, there's no donut shop for 20 miles, normal donut shop. And because of that, Krispy Kreme's is that company that can get it there because it's right outside the property. There's one usually within a couple miles, and that was the solution. But there were a lot of exotic donuts, but I couldn't get to them because they were so far away.
And you didn't have a friend with you that had a rental car that could
Right.
drive you to the donut store, right?
Yeah.
Or a friend
I
that
don't
had
think
cash,
in Orlando, I don't think you were willing to drive that far. It was far
or
because
or a friend that actually had cash on hand to be able to pay for the donuts for you
right.
because they didn't take credit card, right?
Yeah. In Huntington, that was crazy. In Huntington Beach, I've never experienced anything like that. That was really funny.
That was bizarre. It was you, Chris, and I. We took a little ride that morning.
Yeah.
And I also heard something recently. I'm not going to name names, but someone suggested maybe cutting those exotic donuts into quarters because maybe some people are almost afraid to grab a full one, right? They don't want to be that person to have to get a forklift to lift that donut off the box off your table, right? And walk away with that huge castle as you described. So let me ask you this: do more people actually take a full donut, or are you better off going with the samples?
Well, you know, this is a leasing podcast, right? And we're talking about donuts. So it's funny, there's a slight evolution that that's come about in my experience providing donuts. So we've just talked about Krispy Kreme. So now Andrew is asking me, now, do people take a whole donut? And what about the people that reject the donuts? Do you think that they reject it because it's too much or because it's too sweet and they're trying to say, I mean, there's so many excuses as to why people get them and don't get them. And so it was suggested that, well, perhaps, Bruce, you should try cutting them. Cut cutting them to make the pieces more bite-sized and see what your response is if you're trying to get rid of the donuts. So I experimented with that, and it worked. There are people that would normally reject the donut because they don't wanna suffer the embarrassment of walking around with some castle full of whipped cream and Disney figures on their
Right.
donut.
Oreos,
Yeah, Oreos and just all kinds of or cruise ships on the donut. Ooh, I mean, that's embarrassing. I get it. Walking around with a donut that looks like that. Or if I cut it in half, now maybe that person will take that on a plate and walk away with it, and it's more demure, so to speak, for them. And it's an interesting world, and so you have all these personalities when it comes to providing donuts.
So I guess the bigger question behind all of it is, are donuts actually the strategy, or are they just a hook to get people to stop? Because at the end of the day, I think uh, what really works better is bringing more people, right? Or is it getting the right people to stay and have real conversations?
My answer is going to be kind of cheesy. And when it comes to some of the other vendors that show up, whether it's channel partners, who can compete with them, right? you, your company. I mean, there are so many companies that bring so much swag. So I made that decision early on. First of all, I'm coming by myself. I'm not carrying all that crap. And everybody has the same thing. So it's kind of boring, static that everybody has pins and and keychains and some of the same old stuff with their logo on it, but they're carrying this stuff. So every desk, unless you bring something really exotic and something new to the fray, it's I can't imagine that these people are traveling with all this stuff and have to deal with all this trinketry on their desk. So very quickly, I'm like, I'm not doing all that crap. I mean, that's really what I said. I said, I'm not doing it. I'm not coming with brochures, you know, card stands, things hanging on the thing, water fountains on the desk, electricity chargers, and all these boxes full of stuff. I did that at a previous company. It was a nightmare. I
Yeah.
said, I'm gonna bring donuts. I'm gonna bring donuts. I'm gonna see how that works. It wasn't sexier than that, Andrew. I'm sorry to disappoint,
No,
but
that's yeah. I
it
think
was
it's great. I mean,
call it
honestly,
laziness. Call it for what it is.
you
Laziness
know,
or just being real.
I think there's a lot of strategy behind it. Honestly, I mean, it's a great afternoon pick me up, right? They get a little bit of a sugar high, like that 3 o'clock crash.
Right.
So they come by your booth, they grab a donut, and they get some energy. And while they're there, they you have a good conversation with them, right? And you close the box when you shut the booth down for the day. So how many people are going to go over there and open up that box and grab a donut, right? Versus when you were at your previous company, you guys would have these Yetis stacked on tables,
Right.
and people would strategically wait for you to leave your booth, and then they'd come grab the Yeti, and you never had a conversation with those people
Right.
because all they were there for is to grab a $40 Yeti, right?
I think an element of what you said happened over time, which now it can become a strategy. It didn't start off like that. Just straight up. Let's just be honest. It did not start out like that, but it evolved to that because you're right. It people see is Bruce here with they'll see me walking in the hallway. Did you bring the donuts?
Yeah.
Yes, I
Yep.
brought the donut. I'm coming by. I'm coming by. Right? It's all or another guy was like, oh, there you are. Here's the guy with the donuts. And you get these conversations and you meet people and they start seeing you in a different light and you make friends that way, even albeit through the donuts, right? And that's just the way it happens.
It starts with a donut, right?
Yeah.
And a conversation that ultimately leads to building a relationship, which leads to establishing trust, which leads to closing a deal, right?
Right. And
So
the trust thing now it's a lot of pressure now because people trust that I'm going to be there with the donuts, so they trust that I'm going to be there. Therefore, I have to be there and I have to come. And my goodness, if I didn't, I don't know what that's going to look like. Oh, Bruce is not here with the donuts. What happened with TCS, right? I'm so used to
yeah,
them being there with the donuts. So I've
you've
kind of
got this
created my
cult
own.
following.
Yeah, I've created my own little following.
Yeah,
Now I
I
have to
mean,
always back it up.
you've raised the bar. You've
Yeah,
set expectations. People are, they. I think they also want to know: is it going to be Krispy Kreme, or is it going to be a local favorite? Right? You know,
right. Well,
you get
those yeah, there are a couple of guys that are donut eaters, and they cannot wait to come get two or three. So if it's the bigger ones, the heftier ones, they'll get those too. It's actually what's really funny. I don't want to be off on a tangent, but if for the audience that's looking, the conventions take breaks. There's a lunch break, and then maybe the keynote speaker will speak either in the morning or in the afternoon. So that's about an hour and a half break. So the hallways inside the convention go vacant. There's nobody around. There are people that wait for that moment to come pluck all the desks while no one's around, no one's looking. And oftentimes I'll sit there and have my lunch when nobody's around, and these rats These rats with handbags come around, plucking all the desk, and that's when they'll come grab an apple fritter for
Right.
themselves, right? That's the only nobody's looking, and someone will grab that 8-inch apple fritter and take it behind the curtain and tear that thing up. So
Yeah, they don't want to do it in the middle of the evening reception,
right,
right?
right.
While they're drinking a cocktail.
That's a
But
funny observation.
yeah, no, it's interesting. It's interesting as a service provider, as when you have a booth, you can just sit back and kind of observe, people watch.
Right.
But is there anything else that we've had a great debate or discussion about donuts and how that ultimately leads to closing deals. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience that we may not have covered during our discussion?
Yeah, we didn't cover Go Vikings.
Yeah, yeah. You guys had an interesting offseason. I think to just touch on that quickly, I think what you guys need a quarterback. I think you have all the pieces in place.
Yeah,
You had a stud quarterback. I think you guys are in the conversation of being a Super Bowl contender. So that's the wild card. If you guys had Josh Allen, you guys would probably win. You'd have won 2 or 3 Super Bowls by now.
I actually do agree with that statement.
You know,
Yeah. Otherwise, unless everything remains to be seen. There's no sense in even talking about them because right now it's complete question mark as to what they're going to be this year. So we don't have to take up a whole bunch of tape.
Right. Well, yeah, it's just going to be, let's see how things shake out with your quarterback. If McCarthy's the guy and he, rebounds nicely from a couple of disappointing injury riddled seasons, or is Kyler Murray the guy, right? Which he's had some success early in his career. I mean, if he would just stay away from playing video games, I think he'd be a much more productive quarterback.
Right.
But no, I think he's definitely talented. And you got the stud receivers. If the Bills had Jefferson and Addison, I think we'd have a couple of Super Bowls that we'd be talking about. So both of our teams have question marks around it. Obviously you have the biggest question mark is always going to be around the quarterback position. Allen's had a great career to this point with only having Diggs for those 3 or 4 years, but aside from that, he really hasn't had he's had some great number 2s, some really nice number 3s, and some tight ends, but in a good running back, good run game. But yeah, that's the missing piece. So who knows? Maybe with DJ Moore and with some other players that we've like Shakir, and maybe Josh Palmer has he's healthy this year, and he can add some value to that position. And our tight ends, Kincaid stays healthy, I think. But we got the question mark around having a new head coach, right?
Right. That's my question for you was going to be, what's going to be the philosophy of your new coach?
Yeah.
Is he a defensive or offensive coach? What's his main philosophy?
Well, he was Allen's quarterback coach, and then he became his offensive coordinator, and then ultimately got promoted to head coach. So he has an offensive background.
Okay.
But we brought some guys in from Denver. Jim Leonard, who was a former Bills player, I would say safety, hybrid linebacker. So he's now our defensive coordinator, and we have a new offensive coordinator. But yeah, I guess we have question marks going into the season too. I think that's going to be the biggest question mark. How are things going to gel? What's the culture? It's things are going to look and they're going to look differently than what we're used to under the previous regime. But we got Allen.
Are you in the new stadium? Is it all?
Yeah, I'll be there. I have my tickets. So when the Vikings come to Buffalo, you'll have to bring Chris back.
Oh yeah,
we'll go to another game, and the new venue that's going to open up this fall. So, but yeah, we can debate. We'll debate football maybe next time I have you on.
Yeah,
and hopefully, who knows? Maybe both our teams will see each other in the Super Bowl. You never know, right?
Yeah.
So
you never know.
But this has been an incredible, insightful conversation. You've shared what truly works in that middle market, what doesn't, what brokers need to do if they want to be successful at that level. What stands out most is how intentional your approach is around credit, the relationships, and that long-term thinking. for brokers listening, there's a lot of practical takeaways here around preparation, transparency, and investing in your own development. I want to thank you for joining us and sharing your perspective with the ACS community.
I appreciate you. I appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully somebody learned something today. That would be my goal.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure they will. So, and to everybody listening, thanks for tuning in to the ACS Portfolio Perspective. If you found value in today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, share it with someone in your network, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.